So yeah, good afternoon and good evening to some. I am Bob Audet. I'm very excited about this panel and thank you for joining today's session. We have representation from individuals across the globe in today's session. I'm a data management subject matter expert and leader at Guidehouse, a global management and technology consulting firm. I have over 20 years of experience in advising CDOs and data leaders across different industries. I'm also viewed as an industry data leader. I've spoken at the Symposium now for 3 years and have published multiple articles related to data management. I'm happy to announce our distinguished panelists and CDOs who represent various parts of the federal government and global financial institutions, tackling similar but different data issues and taking strides to make their organizations more data-driven. I'll now have each of these panelists briefly introduce themselves, starting off with Catherine.
Thanks, Bob. Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Tong. I'm the Chief Data Officer at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. I've been with the Federal Reserve Board for about almost 3 years, but in my role only since last October. We at the Federal Reserve Board, we use a lot of data and work very hard and very proud of ourselves in terms of our data-driven policy making. So I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Catherine. Samir?
Yes, hi all. I'm Samir Boualla, calling in from France, Paris. I'm the Chief Data Officer at ING Bank France. A long history within ING, but also especially within data. Working for now approximately 25 years already. With that subject in different areas related to data and different aspects of it. And I'm happy to join you all here to discuss and to express the past and the future.
Great, Samir. Beth?
Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Puchek. I'm the Chief Data Officer for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is one of the component agencies of the Department of Homeland Security. USCIS adjudicates applications for immigration benefits like green cards and citizenship and work authorizations. And aside from our human resources, data is our most important asset. Every aspect of our mission, which is primarily about taking in information and making decisions, and our mission support really relies on data. I've been in this role of the Chief Data Officer for about a year, although the office has been around for about 2.5 years. And everything that I'll share with you all today is my own opinion and does not represent that of the federal government. Thanks, Bob.
Great. Thank you, panelists. And for me, this has really been a research effort that started in about mid-2020, really to better understand, I think, the frequently used term that many of us hear, data-driven culture. And I interviewed numerous CDOs from various organizations, different countries. I really learned some interesting and insightful and different insights for really all CDOs that are in data leaders that are really looking to weave data into the fabric of their organization. So as session participants, I really hope today that you get a few things from the session. Number one is a better understanding of what does it mean to be a data-driven culture and why does it matter? What are some of the obstacles that CDOs often encounter in helping their organizations to be more data-driven? How have they overcome them? And what are some of the best practices that can be employed? What are some of the associated benefits? And what are some actionable lessons learned that each of us on this session today can take away and use and apply? Some of you have already posed questions as part of this session. I encourage each of you to use to pose questions during the session. And during the Q&A, which we have approximately about 10 minutes toward the end, we will address as many questions as time permits, but I do definitely encourage you to pose questions. Before we start, I'd like to set the stage for this panel. Data is front and center of everything an organization does. It can help business executives make better informed decisions, predict how customers are likely to buy. It can produce smarter products and services. It can optimize business processes. Data also powers transformative technologies like AI, machine learning, predictive analytics, and others, which organizations are looking to leverage to give them a competitive advantage and to better achieve their mission. And CDOs are faced with an increased demand for trusted, visible, accessible, understood, and connected data with more sophisticated techniques, tools, data with greater speed and agility. But whether data can realize its full potential is not determined just by the technology investments that a company makes. It also requires companies to have a strong focus in embedding data into every aspect of their culture and processes, which can involve big change of perspective for many firms. CDOs are at the forefront of making this cultural shift. And in my conversations with the numerous CDOs reveals that CDOs are the glue that really help to connect the dots and build the bridges to understand and address data challenges. And the mastery of communications is so critical to success. Now, being the inquisitive person that I am, I started this journey to understand what the meaning and importance of a data-driven culture was. I started by trying to understand, well, what is culture? What is corporate culture? And in understanding from different CDOs, their insights related to this and how a CDO's understanding of these terms, I think, can help in adding more meaning and life to the phrase. And using these two definitions that you see on the slide, there are a few key words that really stick out to me. Firstly, shared wishes and values. So really the degree to which all people in organization value this trusted, understood, accessible, visible, and connected data that improves people's insights, fuels operations and decisions. Another part of this is how we behave and act. Do we have the standards, the policies, the processes, procedures to effectively manage data across the lifecycle? And do CDOs have the right attitude, being persistent, patient, able to listen and committed, and improving outcomes? Letting individuals flourish in their roles, confidently using data to make decisions, to be able to share that externally and improve operations. Now, as part of the session, I also set up a polling question because I really wanted to get many people's insights from the symposium. Now, I took a screenshot from the results of that poll 7 o'clock this morning. It has since evolved since 7 a.m. this morning, but I think there's a few themes that emerged for me. Data literacy and training around data, trust, commitment, and value focused. Now, let's hear from the perspectives and the stories related to enabling a more data-driven culture from our CDO panelists. So we'll start first with this question of what does a data-driven culture mean to you, and do you think it matters and why? Now, first going to pose this question to Catherine, and I really want to try to get the perspectives from really each of the CDOs on the panel.
Thanks, Bob. So I think how we define data-driven culture is very important. I think, Bob, you just mentioned that you started with looking at organizational or corporate culture. So, you know, the data culture cannot stand by itself. We have to figure out how it fits into the overall organizational culture. And the term data-driven, I mean, it's been around for a long time. And it had its value in the past, especially when we just started using data, using data just getting popular. And we try to gear people away from using their gut feelings to make business decisions. So we use the term data-driven. And we emphasize data-driven, you know, so that we embrace the so-called data-driven business decision-making. But today things are different. Especially in the financial industry and in the economic research areas, the areas that I'm in, using data, it's like an everyday thing now. With the explosion of the data volume, the Internet of Things, everyone emphasized the importance of data. However, data is still an afterthought when we talk about business operations. When we set up a business process, it's viewed as a cost of doing business. Therefore, it's always, or most of the time, underinvested. So the term I heard most today is that Even though we have a lot of problems with data, we don't want to improve data just for the data's sake. So I would prefer to define the data culture in a slightly different way. So if you're like me in an organization that is data rich and data is already widely used, I will promote the term called business-driven data culture. That is, data is seamlessly embedded in our business norm. It's an integral part of business operations and business processes. And data lays out a critical path that enable us to extract information and insight from the data so that we can use that information and insight to make business decisions. In short, I would emphasize that data has a purpose. I think that actually was one of those in the word cloud. It was one of the terms as well. You know, the thirst of data alone is not enough. It doesn't get us that far. The thoughtful business-driven data usage so that we can get the information needed is the key.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Samir, do you have any, from your own perspective, any additional thoughts you would like to add to this specific question?
Well, I think that Catherine captured it quite well indeed. Being data-driven on itself is, of course, well, the question comes back, why do you want to be data-driven? And what's your purpose and what's your goal to achieve with being data-driven? So let's start with a why do you want to be that? If I reflect that on my own or the situation I'm in or the organization I'm working in, I'm reflecting that to the fact that we're a digital bank, which means that the only reflection that we have from our surroundings, our customers, our stakeholders or employees is always based on the data that we collect. Because we don't have any face-to-face contact anymore, as in the past, of course, traditional banks used to do with their customers. It's much more limited. So for us, becoming, well, let's say data-driven, data is the key in our organization where it comes to data literacy and data fluency to understand what that data is telling you regarding your surrounding. And this is where it becomes important for us.
Great, Samir, thank you very much. Beth, you want to talk a little about from your own perspective?
Sure. I mean, yes, being part of a data-driven culture for USCIS is very important. For us, it means that we're making decisions that are based on true evidence. And it means that we're really questioning everything. Having that culture be part of our corporate culture means that it has a seat at the table of our governing boards, and it's not an afterthought. It is important to us. I don't think that the public would be happy if we weren't data-driven. Of course, we make benefit decisions based on our data, but we really also manage our operations internally because we're fee-funded as opposed to being congressionally appropriated. So we have to know how many receipts we're getting, to know how much fee to charge, to know how many employees we have, we will need to do the work. So we really act more like a business than an appropriated agency. And in the office of the Chief Data Officer, you know, our slogan is connecting people, data, and decisions, because we really are in that seat of helping bring data to everyone's mind and making products and data easy to understand at every single staff level that we have, not just the 1,000 data analysts that we have in the agency, but also every single adjudicator and supervisor and executive across the board. So having a seat at the table, and Samir, to your point about why do we want to be data-driven, the analogy that I always use with being data-driven is you're goal-driven. You're much more likely to achieve any goal that you set if you're data-driven. I like to use a weight loss analogy. You know, you step on the scale, you set a baseline for your goal, and then you step on the scale every day and collect data and you're managing your trends to make decisions, to make behavior choices every single day. And it's very similar in the work that we do as well. How are your behaviors being affected by the information that's in front of you?
Now, Beth, thank you. And thank you for each of the panelists. I guess I will briefly summarize what I heard are some key takeaways from this specific question, which is that more of a business-driven culture that really is seamlessly embedded into our norms and how we operate day to day. A journey on exploration of why do we need the data, and helping that understand and using data literacy to improve how people use data. And then the other parts that Beth, you talked about, which are connecting people and data and decisions, and data being at the seat of the table and helping to facilitate discussions, and being data driven, allowing us to be more, be more goal oriented. So definitely some great insights. Samir, I am going to shift a little bit over to the question on the far left about some of the obstacles. What are some of the obstacles that you've encountered in helping your organization become more data driven, and how have you overcome them? What are some of the best practices that you have leveraged along the way?
Yes, there are many obstacles and many challenges, but that's also the let's say the excitement of this role, to be honest. I think that one of the biggest obstacles is that data is very often linked to or perceived as something which is purely tech. And the biggest challenge is to explain and give examples, of course, and to bring data out of that technology perspective into a business perspective, and to explain and show to your stakeholders what the role of data is from a business point of view. And that is one of the most complicated, I would say, but also quite easy, because on the end, I love simple metaphors. So in fact, we're all using data because we all know what the weather report is stating and how we should interpret it. Should we wear a coat or not? Or should I take my umbrella or not? And that's all based on data that I'm looking at my television screen or my app or whatever. But that's the perception that we should create around data. It's not something which is output or input from a system. It means something which I can use in my day-to-day decision-making, life, etc. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I was on mute. Thank you. One of the things that you had brought up briefly, Samir, in your prior remarks was around literacy. So how is literacy, in your opinion, playing into overcoming some of these obstacles? And what are the things that you're doing on that dimension? And this has come up as part of many other individuals' feedback from the word cloud that was produced. So just curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, one of my best experiments, or maybe experiences, I must say, is that I had colleagues who had never heard of data at all. But they wanted to start working with data. And what we did is we brought people together, because data has many aspects. It has, of course, a technical aspect in itself, but it also has, for example, a content component in it, the business. If I'm analyzing and looking into data, what type of data, in which context should I place the data? And then you have all kinds of skills around it, like data wrangling or playing with the data, as I call it, to get the meaning and understanding out of the data. And those are the nicest journeys I have seen, where people are collaborating together from different dimensions, different expertise, and laying down the puzzle together and helping each other also to understand the data, to be able to analyze it, and after all, communicate about it. And to close it very short, on the end, data is about people, as some of the CDOs very often refer to, which is absolutely the case.
Sure, that makes sense. Beth, any thoughts on this question? Like, what are some of the things in your experiences at USCIS that you've bumped up against, and what have you done to surmount those challenges?
Sure. So I think that there are two primary ones. Leadership buy-in and knowing how to focus when you have so much data out there and being able to focus on what's truly important to the business. Although it really hasn't been my experience at USCIS, leadership buy-in, if you don't have it, then you really don't have a chance to get the subsequent layers of the organization interested in looking at the data and using it to make decisions. If the head honcho, if the director is looking at a report or a dashboard or some other product on a really frequent basis and using that to ask questions of your operation, then you're going to use that too, and on down the chain. So if the leadership buy-in's only lukewarm, or if they don't really care, then it's really hard for people to use their own discretionary energy to care and to focus on something that their boss isn't looking at. So then the other part, being able to focus on what's truly important. So I'm sure, just like Samir and Catherine, you guys have more data than you know what to do with. And that's, becoming more and more the state of play as the world amasses more and more metadata. So being able to really focus on what's important, what type of decisions the business is making, what kind of challenges they're facing, to be able to know what information, what metrics to focus on. So if you're not able to hone in on what those challenges are, then you're easily going to get bogged down in reports and data and graphs and charts that are really distracting, that aren't going to help you focus. So kind of consequent to that, you have to be okay not focusing on everything. There are things that you're not paying attention to, and you don't have time for that, and that's okay. But knowing where the important things are and letting other people be able to look at some of the ancillary stuff on not a daily, every minute basis is an okay thing. So yeah, the two challenges that I've seen, particularly in the federal government, is that leadership buy-in and knowing how to focus on what's important.
Yeah, and if Beth, if I could probe a tiny bit on the leadership piece, and what can you maybe share an example or a technique that you use to get that leadership buy-in? What have you seen sort of successful that has helped to build goodwill, good credibility, and then eventual funding and resources? Can you share any insights on that?
Yeah, finding a challenge that has been hard to solve. It can be really small or it can be really big. When my office was first getting started, we were brand new to the whole agency. USCIS had never had a CDO before. So a lot of folks didn't know what that meant, especially in government parlance. They thought, how is this different from a CIO? Why, what are you here to do? So we embarked on a lot of listening tours to really figure out how to connect the data to the mission. And there was an issue out in one of our service centers where access to another department's data was impacting their ability to do these daily checks, and it was taking hours and hours for one person to do it every day. So we were able to call up the other agency. So, this operation was kind of buried in the field, but we came and we listened, and we were able to find the point of contact in this other agency negotiate with them and find a really solid workaround for the team in the field, so that instead of taking, I think it was like 6 hours a day for one person, it took upwards of like 12 minutes most. So it totally changed the day. And it really won us some credibility, not just with that team, but with that whole organization. So that was a small win, but you know, for the leadership buy-in, getting the head honchos interested and caring, USCIS has a backlog of unadjudicated cases, and being able to understand the composition of that backlog, the kind of the reasons for it, how it's evolved over the years, and trying to look at it from multiple different perspectives so that you can find those ways to chip away at it. Providing the insight. So we've provided a couple of enterprise-wide dashboards that really cut away at the silos that we had. Has really helped provide credibility, because leadership has never had that enterprise perspective before. It's only ever been, you know, from 3 or 4 different perspectives, and you know, the head of the agency has had to piece those things together.
Now, those are fantastic examples. I appreciate the additional color on getting the leadership buy-in. Catherine, would love to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, I would echo with everything that Beth and Samir said, and I share all the pains. I think if you run a work cloud on pains, CDOs go through, it'll be a very interesting work cloud on that. One thing, you know, talking about obstacles when it comes to data culture, it's actually, interestingly, it's not data or anything associated with data. It's actually, in my mind, the biggest one is actually communications, and more specifically, the language we use when we communicate anything about data. Just like in any culture, you know, you know, when we go from one country to another, a lot of the local cultures the culture differences are embedded in the local languages, right? It's the same thing when we establish a data culture. You know, data governance means different things to different people. Data quality is defined differently in different organizations. And most people don't know the difference between data quality versus data integrity. Frankly, they don't care that much about it either. So, you know, there's, and you know, talking about business buy-ins, whether you have top down or bottom up, the resistance is always going to be there, and people are always going to say, I don't know what it means, and you know, can you explain it to me? So to me, to overcome that obstacle, you know, to me, the first step, I'm asking my team, past and current, to raise the bar on our own data professional workforce. That is, you know, I would like to see our data professionals speak multiple languages, not just the data language, but also the technology jargon and the business terms. You know, we become the interpreters and bridges between technology and business. And, you know, we use layman's terms. Samir used the example to emphasize the importance of data, where data is embedded in our lives, using weather forecasts. You know, we use layman's terms when we talk about data management and data governance, so that we don't create our own barriers. And over time, you know, we will put, you know, those data terms little by little, you know, through data literacy or just through a lot of communications throughout the day.
Now, thank you, Catherine. I think some of the takeaways for me in this specific topic area, or this specific question, you know, data is about the people. And in order for people to effectively have a dialogue around data, they need to communicate. But they need to communicate with a language that individuals coming from different backgrounds within an organization or outside an organization can understand. So it is using more plain English or plain whatever, wherever you're coming from and whatever country you're in, is a more basic language to be able to have the dialogue. It's about, and I like Beth's examples of how to garner the credibility and goodwill by finding that difficult problem, or even finding that small problem, looking for that small win, to be able to win the credibility and goodwill that can then be used and become infectious. And then also being able to, Beth, when I heard you speak as well, what I took away from that is, at the core of this, ultimately what you did was addressing people's information needs. But people have different information needs. Leaders have different needs that they want in a dashboard, and the other individuals you had highlighted have a different need. And Samir's example of all of us who every day may look at the weather to know whether I need to water my plants in the afternoon, know how to interpret that data. That's an information need we have. So I think part of this at the core is being focused in how we address information needs to build that credibility, having that language to effectively communicate. I do think a lot of this, it takes persistence, because there will be obstacles. It takes pragmatism, and it takes being committed to knowing that there will be obstacles, there will be resistance from people. So let's toggle over to our third question, which I think, Beth, you've already started to highlight some of this, and I'm curious if there's more to share on the benefit side. What have you seen? What are the benefits you've seen because of the data-driven culture and how that's taken root? And I know you've already shared a couple of good examples, but I want to see if there's any further that you'd like to add to this question.
Sure. So yes, the benefits are, there's many. I mentioned achieving our goals, being more goal-oriented is a big one. We've been able to kind of isolate our bright spots in operations so that, you get the sense of what really works in one field office, and how to spread that to other field offices so that maybe they can share some of the same efficiencies across the board. We've also seen, CIS is a pretty data literate place, but it's that focus issue. And one area where we've been able to start achieving goals is in efficiencies. All of our adjudicators have efficiency goals, and in the past, it's been hard to know what your efficiency has been on a more than maybe quarterly basis. But one of our leaders, one of our very data-driven leaders, she's helped push out access to an efficiency dashboard to every single adjudicator so that they know what their efficiency is on a daily basis, so that they know what their individual impact on achieving the agency's mission is. And having that insight is everything. It gives them a scale to step on every day and affect their own behaviors. So it really helps us achieve our goals. Another way, particularly in this time of changing operations due to COVID-19, it's helped us be a lot more responsive. We've been able to provide, again, windows into the data for a much wider part of our organization through this facilities dashboard that brings in open source data together with our local data to be able to help our facilities managers know how to operate their local facility. We also had a challenge at our lockbox operations, which is where a lot of the physical receipts are intake, where the intake operations is. They open envelopes, they look at the application to see if it can be accepted and the check to go along with it. And there was a huge front log of applications there. And being data driven has enabled us to reroute some work, to figure out how to make, pull the different levers to affect operations so that we could clear that front log. We're also able to be a lot more responsive to the administration. If policies change or new policies are added, because we're able to have a much better insight into our operations as a result of, like I mentioned before, these enterprise views, these enterprise analytic products that we've created. And we're really just able to start asking the hard questions of our operations. It's starting to help us optimize how we do our work.
Great. Now, Beth, those are fantastic examples. Catherine, anything you'd like to highlight from your own experiences?
Yeah, I fully agree. Just to add, when the data culture takes root, it definitely really helps us to achieve our goals, to extract the insights. One thing that also Beth mentioned, the data can also be used in terms of manage our own operations. And data by itself is part of our business operations. So, when the data culture takes root, it really makes our operation management a lot more smoother. We don't need to come back to fix the data, fix the data problems. The data is there to actually being truly the asset to enable us to, extract the information, extract the insights. And, people don't see data as a pain, as a burden. It's actually, well, in a way that, we don't want people to actually think data totally separately from their business processes. And, and also one example, we had to set up some business processes very quickly during the pandemic. And we did that, very efficiently, effectively, and that process worked. And when the process set up is running, business running, and we realized we need to do some analysis on it. And then people start looking into, okay, let's get the data. It should be simple. Not so. It took us a lot of time to chase down the data, figure out where we get the data, how the data is collected. It takes months or even over a year to collect some of the data pieces. So, if we had thought about data and people start thinking about data, even at the very beginning of setting up that business process, our lives will be a lot easier. And also for people to think about not just not data, in one aspect, but all aspects of the data lifecycle. Sorry about that term, that jargon in the data world. For example, people kept saying this piece of data is free. And I'm saying free data is never free. It costs something for us to work with it. So, that's a long journey and we're really just at the starting point. So it's not a project that would end soon.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. Samir, anything you want to add from your own experiences?
Well, I once again, I think the same. I can only agree. I'm glad to hear the word business processes and data. And indeed, Catherine, what you're stating is exactly one of the benefits I have seen, and not so long ago, where I saw how data quality, as an example, drove us to go through our business processes, understand our business processes, the relation between the business processes and the data that is created, processed, etc., and how it is being consumed, and which discrepancies are there, and what is the impact of your data quality, your business process on data quality, etc., etc. And that is one of the, I think, indeed, very valuable exercises to do, not only in my view, because it supports you to make the business take ownership of their data. Because I think that's one of the important elements there. That being in a data-driven organization also means that the business takes ownership of its data, understands its data, has invested in its skills and competences in the organization, in the people, to be able to do that, and then can start leveraging on all the beautiful things that you can do with data.
That's thank you for our panelists, and once again I'll summarize before we sort of wrap up with our last question and then questions from the audience. But the things that I took away from this are that equipping people with trusted data that is accessible, they understand it, it affects their behaviors. It affects how they perform. It allows us to be more goal-oriented. It allows us to be more responsive to various constituents. it allows us to be more efficient in how we operate. And I think both Samir and Catherine, I think, highlighted that, which understanding the marriage between business process and data creation and data that's updated and how it's consumed as it relates to that process is really important. So those are some of the things that I think those are some of the things that I'd like to highlight. And we're going to wrap up with our last question and hand over, and then we'll cover Q&A. And this is the last slide that I have, but I really want to just touch upon, and we'll start with Catherine. What are some of the one or two lessons learned that you would want to communicate to other data leaders, CDOs, and their quest to build a data-driven culture? And some of those things you may have already highlighted and talked about, but what would be those last two things you might impart from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I already highlighted, the language thing. You want to kind of like the quote unquote dumb down the data terms. Whenever one example, some of my business partners said, tell me exactly what data governance is. And my team threw out numerous different definitions. Anything you can Google on internet, there are beautiful phrases, and that won't work. So eventually I just said, how about let's make it simple. Data governance, just think about data governance as a group of activities or business procedures that can make your data managing data easier and better. That's all. Just remember that. And that would think about when you think about data governance. And people said, well, I understand those terms. Of course, we'll get into the how discussion, but at least that would get the dialogue going, by using simple terms. That's one thing that I cannot emphasize enough. The other one I want to say is actually, it's okay to ask for help, ask people surrounding us to help us to build that data culture. We don't have to take on all the burdens ourselves. Find ambassadors. One of my fellow government agencies, CDOs, actually said one time, in our CDO job description, part of that should be very similar to a diplomat. So in a way that, we need people to help us. We need all those helpers to help us repeat all the things about data and truly appreciate and build and promote that data culture.
Awesome, Catherine. Beth, I don't know if you're still with us. Are you on via phone? She may have dropped by accident. So Samir, let's hear from you related to some of the lessons learned you would like to impart with folks.
Yes, I think the same thing as Catherine already explained. You also mentioned it a few times, Bob. My best experience is, and my role really, even before, let's say, the role of CDO was acknowledged as such, it's about bringing people together. And it is really making sure, as I said earlier, to bring people together with different skill sets and needs, and to make people collaborate. So it is indeed somehow a part is diplomacy, but a part is also being that connecting bridge between and within the organization and different people. And this is where I think people also really have fun in doing so, because they are not only learning their colleagues, but also learning new skills, new competences, and new things which bring them further in the day-to-day job, where data is becoming more and more important. And that's the biggest benefit.
Great. Thank you, Samir. Beth, I think you might be back on. Maybe not. Okay, so we're going to transition over. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and we're going to transition over to some of the Q&A. And I appreciate individuals who have posed questions. And some of the questions that I have heard are, there's Beth. Beth, can we hear you?
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the last question around.
Yes.
I know you lost your internet connection. I'm not going to let you off the hook easy. So, about the lessons learned you would like to leave with data leaders and CDOs in their journey to become more data driven. What would be those couple things you would want to highlight? They may be things you've already touched upon, maybe not.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, I think, I have sort of touched upon it already, but making sure that you really know how data supports the mission, being able to focus on what's most important. And then starting small. The data ocean is so big. So pick something and start there and just start charging forward. You'll start getting champions joining your team before you know it. So don't be afraid to start small and really find those opportunities for quick wins and celebrate those quick wins and socialize them so that everyone knows about the great work that you're able to do with the data. And I think we've sort of all said it, but communicate, finding that common language and repeating it over and over and over. When we first launched our data strategy, I thought we had reached every single corner of the organization to socialize what this was and what this meant and how people could behave in this new way. And, I thought we got everywhere, but absolutely not. Once we started going out into the field, there's still plenty of people that had no idea what I was talking about. So if you think that you've over communicated it, do it 20 more times because it never gets old. People forget, new information comes in, and you just have to constantly remind folks. So don't be afraid to communicate and spend a lot of time doing it. You're spending a lot of time building these technical products, and people really want to know how to.
Great. Your internet connection may have flaked out a tiny bit, but that's okay. I think we got the full gist on communications. I think that in some of my conversations with CDOs, the one thing that I would maybe add to your communications piece is communicating smartly and really understanding, based on the various constituents that you are trying to communicate with, what types of communications and what methods work the best and that reach them. Is really important to kind of measure that, and so that you can be more successful in your communications. So there's been a few questions that have been posed, and panelists, please, in your own experiences, certainly chime in. I will chime in on a couple as well. One of the questions sort of near and dear to my heart is, how can we measure the maturity of a data-driven culture, and any sample metrics that we can share? So anyone want to take that question?
I think it's a very good question because it's not about data maturity of the organization itself, but the maturity of your culture and your data-driven culture in that sense. To be honest, I haven't seen the metric itself yet, but it's a very good question to think about how to do this. Would it be the amount of skills and expertise people have in a certain department, as an example, or the amount of dashboards and metrics that they are creating based on data? It's a good one. Nice. Oh.
Any other perspectives from Catherine or Beth on that?
I don't have a magic metric in my mind on this. To me, it's more qualitative. That is, back to what I said, if I see data embedded in the business processes, that is, whenever somebody come up with a business process procedure, if there's a portion that says data on it, that means our data culture has taken root. But if you see a business procedure, it's really step one, click here, click there, not talking about data, then we're not there yet. So that's my way of seeing it. And the other one, of course, is on people. There's definitely, you can actually come up with measures in terms of skills, come up with skill data professional skill catalog, the career, not ladders, actually the career ladders that we're actually looking at it for data professionals. That is actually different from the traditional type of technology professionals. So I think, if you can actually develop a program like that, that's a really good sign.
Yeah, I would say it's qualitative and quantitative. Some of the quantitative ones that may not be a true indicator of data literacy, but you can track how many people are looking at the products that are out there that that leadership is looking at. So seeing kind of what slice of the organization is also looking at them can help you see, and that can be a little bit qualitative too, depending if you see your data champions looking at them. Another is, we are trying to up our game in terms of what our data champion skill sets are as well. And we have some training courses that we're trying to get folks through. So being able to track how much training folks are taking that we're producing. But I really think that the big one is, again, with the leadership buy-in. If your leaders are referring to the products that are helpful, if they're asking questions that are coming from these products, and you're starting to get questions from other parts of the organization, to me that's almost more meaningful than any metric could indicate.
Yeah, no, I think all your perspectives are great. And I mean, a couple of things I might add in my own experience is, it's more of an indicator than it is a metric, is when data is really at the seat of the table for some of the strategic priorities of an organization. That is an indicator that, and the CDO and other data leaders are at the table helping to support those strategic efforts, is at least an indicator that that you have a more data-driven culture. Now, I happen to have a lot of experience working with various different industry data maturity models, and none of them really touch upon how you measure the maturity of a data-driven culture, I think, to the level that we have talked about it on this call. And I think that's probably a challenge I would throw back at them to really think about. Should there be a way for us to kind of more effectively at least assess the maturity of it, and beyond just the metric piece? So that's just another little tidbit. Let me see what other questions we have here. We may have time for one more question. This one is about, we all encountered resistance. And every opportunity, the change that data, this is a complicated question the way it's worded. Give me 1 second. Yeah, I mean, part of this is, I think the essence is that, we are all sort of, as it relates to becoming more data-driven, that there's resistance that we often face, and really at every opportunity. And the change that data implementation implies, how do we overcome that challenge? And they're asking whether the shock effect is better than playing the softer approach to driving the change related to data. I don't know, it's a little bit of a complicated question, but does anyone want to take a stab at that? I mean, we could simplify that in terms of what best practice change management techniques have you used to try to become more data-driven? Some of them which you've already touched upon, in my opinion, but anyone want to take a stab at that?
If I may, I think this is really something which is related to your data strategy. So if your data strategy, and then maybe we can also touch upon indeed about the sponsorship of senior management to the will and the ambition to become data-driven, where your data strategy plays an important role. And in that data strategy, data culture and data literacy and fluency are part of that. I don't see really a shock effect needed there, because I would say, as Catherine said, we should be diplomats. So not sure if that will work. And it is so what you need here is really the buy-in from your senior management, making sure that your data strategy is supporting your business strategy, and as such as also is acknowledged by everyone. And then it's our role as CDOs, and not only CDOs, to support employees and the organization to mature in that journey, to go along that journey. Is that a fast journey? Is that a long journey? That depends on the organization and the people in the organization itself.
Yeah, we may have time for maybe one or two more brief comments if Catherine or Beth, you want to add anything.
Yeah, I agree. You know, the shock effect is never, you know, change management 101 is definitely completely against that shock effect. Although I have to say, you know, I think building the small wins, you know, like, you know, we used to say, you know, think globally, but act locally, you know, building the small wins, so to me is this, as a CDO, we should always have the long-term goal in our mind, like how somewhere a path to get there. But then work with the people, don't paint a rosy picture 5 years down the road, but also say, this is what we can do in the short term. And, you know, but in our mind, we can put these pieces together that take us 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I'm not a shock and awe type of person either. You attract a lot more flies with honey than with vinegar, right? So really, it's all about building your partnerships, being that diplomat to all parts of the organization. You're absolutely going to run into resistance no matter how great the work you're doing is. There's always going to be someone who doesn't quite buy in, or maybe just doesn't like the results or the projections that you're showing. But you just got to keep in mind that you're doing the right thing. And if there's one bad app, not one bad apple in a bunch, but one hard person to transition, it's just natural. You'll get past it, and honestly, eventually they will get on board. It's hard not to when so many other people really are joining forces.
Great, Beth, thank you. And we're really at time, and I want to thank each of the panelists, Barry, and Wu Young as well, and the entire MIT team for the symposium, for panelist participation. Samir, you're 6 hours ahead of us, so I know it's late, and others that have—
It was great to join you guys.
And others that have decided to join the session. I hope that you have gained some level of insight and value from today's session. And I will put in a small plug that I just published today. If you go to Guidehouse's website, I think I communicated it as well in the app for the conference, a thought leadership piece on becoming a more data-driven culture. So please take a look at that if you'd like to learn more about some of the other insights from that thought leadership piece. So thank you, everybody, and have a great afternoon.